by the North State. too. Yeah, yeah. Me and Brody. I made a motion, just not approve it. You know, he was. He was. All right, we want to get our work session tonight started. We appreciate those that are here, which are all the important people. We want to just make you aware, if you're watching online, that Councilmember Troxel texted. She'll be about 15 minutes late, but she will be here. And tonight we're talking about potential property tax increase for the purpose of capturing the increased costs of city fleet assets due to inflation, and the discussion of potential funding options and the ramifications. And the mayor's budget has been turned over to City Council. And so I'll turn the time over for the rest of the meeting to Mayor Pro Tem Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, and same thing. We appreciate everybody that's here, and hopefully there's some folks out there watching tonight as well. We kind of go over some of this stuff. We appreciate the work that Mr. Cotter has put into this to help explain this to us and get us so we're all kind of on the same page. So, kind of you. Thanks.
Thanks. So yeah, so again, just have some things to go over with the council tonight. First part is kind of just a summary of where we ended, I believe, the last work session, talking about the potential for a new building inspector. As it says in here, Brigham City and Perry City staffs just had preliminary discussions regarding a relationship, a contract regarding Brigham City providing these services to Perry.
This is Poggy. Can I just, maybe it's not a correction, but maybe correct. We're doing a new building inspector anyways, because we need it in Brigham City. But the potential here is for a partnership with Perry to then bear half of, or 60% of the cost of that. So I just wanted to make sure that the city wasn't thinking, hey, we have enough, but now we want to do more just because Perry wants to partner.
Valid point there. As we talked about in previous meeting, our current building inspector has now kind of raised the flag, city administration saying he would like more help, needs more help. What Perry has offered, they have offered 45% building inspectors fully burdened wage of $135,000. So that translates $60,000 a check. Round up, make it $61,000. Previous contractor that Perry City was using estimated that they were spending approximately 500 hours per year there. Really follow that through, figure full-time employees about 2,000 hours. We're about 24-25% of the total employees' time being spent in Perry, whereas they are offering to fund 45% of their fully burdened salary. So why would Brigham do this? Why would we be interested in doing this? It increases revenue from Perry to offset that cost. The building inspector is being asked for it. The additional building inspector is being asked for. So Perry helps offset the cost. Obviously, it's going to enhance our service levels for the city. It does help Perry. One of the cool parts about this is staff had seen that there was going to be a need for an additional building inspector in the future. They identified an employee, began working with him, received the necessary qualifications, certificates, so that he could become building inspector. This will obviously allow us to promote internally this employee to become a full-time building inspector. Right now, he's the public works inspector on the public works department. As you all are very aware, we do have existing contracts with Perry, fire, EMS services, the fire marshal. So it just strengthens this week, strengthen strengthens that collaboration that we do have with Perry. So breakdown is, okay, what's the impact in the budget if this were to happen? $135,000. Perry City will contribute that $60,750, meaning that Brigham City would need to come up with $74,200. We are proposing that we increase the building permit revenue, offset that expense. You can see on the chart where building permit revenue has been going historically. This year, we're anticipating it to hit just right around that $500,000 number. There had already been an increase inside the mayor's budget. We're just going to increase it more to cover that $74,250. The nice thing about the building permit revenue is that is allowed. So as wages go up and the expenses of doing a building inspection increase, we're allowed to go and recoup those costs through the building permit. So if we're finding, hey, we're not covering our true costs here, we can propose a building permit fee. So there would not be an impact on the general fund. One of these things that we can actually cover through the fee of the people utilizing the service. That is the proposal to the council on that. Is there any questions, clarifications you would like about the building inspector and why we are proposing it with the Perry revenue stream as the mayor?
How much is the increase on the building permit over last year?
The building permit increase over last year, it's going to be pretty close to that $75,000, $90,000, if I remember right.
Are you talking about an aggregate
percentage?
or each individual
Yeah,
permit?
what's your average increase? We're gonna tack it on to the building inspection permit.
We want to go and identify what the true costs are, but we fully anticipate, because of what's happening with the growth and everything,
Just the quantity itself.
the quantity itself is going to make up for that building permit.
We're not raising.
We're not proposing an increase right now.
Got it. No.
I'm just saying, if for whatever reason an increase was needed, we can do that and tie it to the actual cost. But right now, we don't.
But you're forecasting this revenue is gonna, based on projections of.
Yep.
That's a great inferred question, though, Councilmember Jeffries, and
Yeah,
that
that's
leads
good.
to that if there does need to be an increase in that fee to hit this, that we can come back with a budget amendment later in the year.
And that's one of the things I just wanted to point out really quick. I didn't mean to step in. So our city administrator, Derek Euler, has been very conscious of what's going on with growth and what's taking place here in Brigham City. And 2 years ago, he approached Tracy Halliday, our chief building official for the city, and said, you need to give, or 3 years ago maybe it was, is you need to give me 2 years notice when we need another building inspector. 2 years ago, Tracy provided that notice. So some of the good ideas that staff had is, like Tom mentioned, with our Public Works building inspector, over the last 2 years, he's obtained every certification except for the plan review. So we have set ourselves up. It's very difficult to find these type of employees, and we're cross-training another individual right now. We went through an interview process for another building inspector at some point, this cross-training. So I feel like because of the mayor and Derek's vision on what was happening, that we've been able to get ahead of this. So we have set ourselves up in a very good situation for this to happen if the council chooses to do so.
And if from that, if you get anything, it's if a young high school kid says, what should I do for a living? Tell them to go become a building inspector, because it's an in-demand job and doesn't require a 4-year degree.
And currently our inspector working, we haven't budgeted, right, because he essentially is working all the time.
So this would switch overtime hours to regular time hours for the new employee.
Yeah, ideally, there'll still be overtime.
Is there a backlog that's going on? I mean, that you're not going to run out of work having 2 guys instead of 1 now, right?
What's down the pipe, but forecast.
Brings up a good point, because if this is managed appropriately, you should save the hours of overtime and just go straight into salary. Wash. managed correctly, if that's what I understand.
Yeah.
So if you think of it that way, it's kind of a no-brainer.
Well,
But if you're,
too, is just,
but if he's still gaining all that overtime hours for the year, then I think we're doing something wrong.
Well, and right now what we're doing is actually we are using our public works inspector to try to keep the overtime down as much. So even though we don't have two building inspectors, the city staff recognizes we want to keep costs down on what we're paying individuals, and it makes sense for us just to take the person that already has their certifications
absolutely.
when Tracy's off and put them over there to keep the hours down. Even though he does work overtime, it's way less than what it would be if we weren't in this situation.
I know it's preliminary and we're but would it be, if we end up working more than 500 hours?
yeah, we've
outside of regular
renegotiated.
business or change that.
I mean, really, that's the,
I'd say that to Councilman Jeffrey's comments, that workload management is based on the workload that we have right now. Bringing that second, we have an explosion of growth, obviously, that's going to contribute to overtime, but then we have to look at, do we hire somebody else again, or do we?
That day comes, yeah.
Yeah.
any additional comments, questions about the building inspector? Or if not, we'll jump into the fun part. So as you will remember from last week's discussion, we talked about fleet fund, the impact is forecasted, planned to have on the general fund inside the mayor's. So the number that we're going to talk a lot about tonight, $405,000. Because that's really the change between going from, we didn't have that 2% inflation adjustment in previous years to this year's budget and how that is impacting inside the general. So what I went and did is I went and looked at some homes inside Brigham City, their historical values over the last couple of years. And then I said, all right, if 2026, because we don't have the finalized numbers yet from the county for property tax values and all that stuff yet. They appear to be very close, but they're just not finalized yet. I went and said, if you remember from Property Tax 101, Brigham City is entitled to the same amount of money it got last year on the same properties using their new value. To make it simple, I just said, all right, 2026, everyone's gonna have the same values that they had in 2025. How much do I need to go get that money for the fleet lease vehicles inside the general fund? If you look over on the side, it talks about property taxes. So that top number is the amount I'm allowed to go get. So that's the revenue we got last year. In this calculation, I said, all right, historically, what has our new growth number been? That's going to be an important part of this discussion. It's going to be an important part that hopefully we get more clarification on. So that new growth money, it will help immensely in this calculation. I just put in $75,000. It's kind of the average we have seen over the last couple of years. So that means I'm going to collect $3.3 million in profit. Remember from the previous slide, I need $405,000 for the lease. Take 405 minus 75, that's where I get the 330 number. So really, that's the number I need to collect in a property tax. So what that means, if I go and looked at all of the different values from last year and what that would mean if I just did it across the board, it would be a 10.3% property tax. I know in the mayor's budget we'd put $450,000 as the property tax. So when we had talked about things, that's where the 450 number came. So really now we're just going to focus on the 405. 405 number, 75,000 I'm planning to get from new growth. I need an additional $330,000 That's a 10.3% property tax increase. And in this scenario, that gets applied across the board. That's not how property taxes work. Just to make this easy, it's something we can wrap our heads around. That's what I did. So you can see, for example, on there, Thor's home value is $405,000. This property tax increase would mean $39 to him for the year. So $3.27. If all of that were to be said, if the council were to say, we want that $330,000 to come from property tax. That makes sense. I got more scenarios to run through, but then I went and looked at a different scenario. We heard the council talk about, hey, and I want to make this also, I guess, abundantly clear on the record too. Mayor Bott did not want a property tax increase. As he talks about repetitively his experience at the fire station with the large tax increase that went through, he's very mindful of, if we don't do these things, we're just kicking the can down the road. And that's staff talked at length with him about these things. So ideally, yeah, staff, the mayor, we'd all prefer to live in a world where property tax wasn't needed. An increase wasn't needed. That's just not the reality of the situation. With that said, what we did next, they came in and looked at it and said, all right, what would happen if we just cut the property tax increase in half? Instead of the 10.3, it's now at 5.15. That gets me $165,000 in the property tax increase. I still need $330,000. Where could I go get it? So it says sales tax increase. That doesn't mean that we're going to increase the rate for sales tax. What it means is, inside the mayor's budget, this year we have budgeted $5.4 million. I'm forecasting we're going to hit that thing right on the head. Maybe just a little bit higher, not as high as we have seen in previous years. We had significant surpluses. As we prepared the mayor's budget and talking with staff and the mayor, we wanted to be conservative with it. So in next year's budget, it has $5.4 million again. A lot of that was just because of the uncertainty of the economy, where we were. And so really, the 3% increase here is, we just go raise that number to $5,505,000. Hopefully we would get it. We just don't know. We left that number conservative because we felt comfortable. I would feel comfortable with this proposed increases. So if you were to do the tax increase in half, you can see the impact it now has on Thor. He's now down to $20 for the year, $1.63. The other thing we thought about was like, okay, hey, if we're not comfortable taking that whole $165,000 to sales tax, where's another area inside the general fund we could take it? That we were conservative in our revenue number. So inside the general fund, there's an ambulance revenue that we receive. There has been a change in how we are allowed to collect that money from our patients, from those who utilize that service. The new bill that just went into effect the start of this month is when they made it impact. We don't fully know what that impact is going to be to ambulance. We anticipate it to actually be a positive for the city. We're just not positive much. So again, we were conservative in the number we put inside the mayor's budget. So if we wanted to split it out, hey, let's put half in sales tax, let's put half in the ambulance revenue. Really, it's the same pair of pants, we just put it in a different pocket. That's what we want to do. That's more than okay. The last scenario I had in through here is, as we've listened to council talk during these, is I've heard, maybe I made the mistake here, but talk of, hey, what would happen if we just increase the transfer from the utility fund from 12% to 12.5? That would generate $158,000 more inside the general fund, meaning I got to go raise property taxes for $172,000. I need that 330 again. That's a 5.3% increase. You can see really it doesn't change much versus the 5.15. Pretty tight in there. So those are kind of the scenarios I'd work through. If the council wants to look at different numbers, I do have a spreadsheet where we can go and plug in the 5 point there in the orange. You go and see if we did this, what would it look like? What would that impact? But really, I think this kind of gives the council the flavor of the different options available to them. One caveat with the utility transfer, because that is going to take money outside of the utility fund over to the general fund, we would then need to go identify capital project inside the utility fund to cut. So that was the last slide I put in here saying, okay, here's what we have coming from the utility fund. We need $150,000 this May. Which projects would the council say, we know more about this? Why should we do it? Why should we not do it? Kind of along those lines. But really, that's what I had presented to you, just kind of to walk you through of what would it look like. And again, this is all very best numbers available to us. And again, a lot can change with that new growth number. If that new growth number were to come in higher, that would obviously mean we could lower property taxing. Good news is we can put this in the tentative budget. I think Mayor Bott walked you guys through this scenario last time. We'll put a number inside the tentative budget for property tax. You'll notice the citizens of that property tax increase will have a public hearing in August regarding the property tax increase. At that time, you could still lower property tax. You just can't increase. So if we were to do scenario 2 or 3 of the 5.15%, and if we got more numbers in as we saw what was happening with property tax and the new growth number became $150,000, we would then propose to council, if they wanted it, to then lower proposed taxes. You wouldn't need the full 160. That makes sense. So with that explanation and rambling, what can I confuse you more on, or try not to confuse you on, help with?
You go to your slide with property tax, sales tax.
So sales tax, ambulance, utility trans. Sorry, I have my Zoom thing right in the middle.
Just put in your spreadsheet number you have 405 in there, lead increases.
Oh,
So I was,
it got moved, yeah.
okay. So then if we go to a thought process, go to your very first one. Yeah.
And again, I put up there on the screen too, I think it's important, I think one of our citizens made the point about we need to be aware, I know the council is, or maybe, and I don't know yet, I haven't heard of other entities that are going to be raising their. I put the Brigham City tax up there and then the entire tax of that home. So, like Polk, he pays a total of $1,928 under this scenario. Of that $1,928, $377 coming to Brigham. You don't need to sum them together. The 377 is included in the. In this scenario, Polk would have a $35 annual property tax increase for Brigham City. That equates to roughly $3. My recommendation, council, would be, okay, what do we feel comfortable with as far as a property tax? Like I heard Councilmember Smith talk about last time. You probably all said it, but he was the one that I remember specifically saying he was more comfortable, maybe that wasn't word he used, but with a 5 to 6. So really that was, after I ran through the math of, okay, we need $405,000 for fleet, 10.3, if I just divide that in half, it gets me in that range that Councilmember Smith had talked. So that's where I ended at. My proposal or council, I guess, to the council would be, really tell me what number they're thinking about for a property tax increase. You know, the other side of it, if you're interested in a utility transfer, that makes things a little bit easier. Not easy. I guess the first question is, are you interested in increasing utility transfer? That's a no. And how much is the property tax increase?
You went from 12.3 to 12.5 on
12 to 12.5.
12 to 12.
Yeah, so it's 0.5%. If you're not interested in doing that, then let's just talk about, okay, what rate are you interested in? If you're interested in the 5.15%, the other $165,000 that we need to go find inside the general. I'm confident what I've explained, ambulance revenue and sales tax, those numbers were very conservative in the mayor's. I don't have any heartburn, any losing sleep at night. We were to just go bump up those revenue numbers and go get the ball. I would have a little more heartburn if it was all going to those numbers instead of property tax, because I think it speaks to the mayor's experience and the council members' experience also is truth in taxation. There's no inflation adjustment. There's nothing to capture any of it. So this allows the city to go and get 5%, capture that, not lose ground on inflation as much. And it really helps avoiding what Mayor bought. Were you the only one that lived through that? Were you on the?
We did as citizens.
I mean, we did as citizens. Like, I believe the initial proposal was doubled. Like, it was 100% increase. Because they've just been kicked down the road so much. In my experience as the county auditor, I watched municipalities do that over and over and over. And I get why. It's not a fun thing to go through a tax increase. But my observation was, is people just kick that can down the road until you have to do 100% increase, and that's just not good for anyone.
I think that, to be honest with you, Tom, I think it's not really about kicking the can down the road. The fact of the matter is that what are we going to talk about next year? So we increase property taxes because this year we're talking about fleet fund adjustments. Got it. Next year, what do we come back to and talk about? Rec department or police station or another firehouse? We've got to raise property tax for that. So it's not about kicking the can down the road. Well, sometimes you got to take a pants and say, hold on a minute, slow down, gotta look at next year and the year after. Not a fan of raising property taxes every year. Now, we talked about that last week. It's tough. So I'm more worried about, okay, I totally understand the fleet adjustment. I think everybody here on this council understands the mathematics and the rationale behind that. Taking an increase of, say, 10% now or 5.15, whatever we decide, what's next year going to look like, the year after? I know we don't want to talk about that.
So that's one of the key components of, hopefully, as the city grows and community and economic development take place, as we bring in large industry. Example being Niagara. Right. Niagara came in, their utilities transfer, if you think about it, their transfer coming off their utilities is what funds our fire department, our station, because of that. The issue, and I get no one's a fan of tax increases. It's just that if we don't do it, you're asking the city to do the same work they did this year with the same dollar that inflated prices. Which, I mean, the city does remarkable work. Staff, they go do amazing things with what we ask them to do. We will do it. That's the awesome part about the staff the city has. You give them the parameters, they'll get it done. It's just becoming harder and harder in that parameter box to get smaller. But yeah, your point's well received.
Tom, does this graph we're looking at right here, 22 to 23 jump? We can see the property tax increase right there. The property values went up. Or was that's not the year we had the tax increase you're talking about, right?
It was
going back a couple more years.
bigger one is that one, but in the only year the city did not do a property tax increase.
That's mostly just the values of the houses more than the property tax.
Correct.
My thoughts are, I don't like the idea of increasing the utility transfer because I think that's just moving money from one pocket to the other. I don't think that brings in any different revenue or anything. I mean, it doesn't, to me, that's not an option because it doesn't help us. It doesn't do anything. And I'm going to take it from this bucket instead of that bucket.
Well, yeah, but what it does do, according to what Tom just said, it does make you reevaluate a couple of projects where you're going to spend money on, so you might have to reevaluate that.
For sure, we're going to have to do that no matter what we do with the money.
I do have a question. This sheet here, on this page, is this everything that you guys, the city plan on purchasing, and everything that's on this to replace everything? I got to replace everything on this list, is that?
That list is the list that was posed by the different departments. So everything above the green line is what will be purchased.
There's two green lines. So you're talking about priorities 1 all the way to 11?
Yeah. So anything above 2.3 million.
There's like 4 numbers.
Replacement vehicles, we're looking at truck, reading this correctly, a new plow truck and salter truck, right? The ambulance, that's the one we've already done, right?
Yeah. So the big green line of number 12 is the cutoff. So everything above the parts, the dump truck, plow, salter, that has been put into the main.
Next question I have is on that sales tax. If we're saying we're gonna get it from the sales tax and we don't hit that increase, are you thinking it's just gonna come out of our fund balance, basically our checking account?
Yeah, if every other revenue were to hold the same, then yeah.
Currently, ITD year to date, what is our sales tax? The same as last year?
Well, Tom's looking that up too. I want to go back to the fleet priority list. So that list could be 4 times as long as what it is. What we do is and Tom's already explained this at past meetings, we meet with every department of the city one-on-one, and we go over maintenance history. We go over wear and tear on problems that we're having with the existing vehicles and equipment, downtime, what it means if that vehicle is down. And so we put everything that's realistic on that. That list could be 3 times that long, but we don't do that because after we meet with all the departments, we get together as a fleet committee, and then we have these conversations where we go over the hows and the whys and justifications.
Councilmember Smith, to your question about sales tax. Through March of on this year, we're at $2,958,000. Previous year, we were at $3 million. They're pretty, it's very, very close. There's a little more, actually, never mind, I grabbed the wrong. $3,084,000. That's why in the budget for this year, like I said, we had $5.4 million based off of historical models and forecasting. We are forecasting to collect $5,403,008.
I do have one question, because this is what stuck out on this page, is maybe Chief Reyes can help explain it. It says 8 new F-150s. Seems like a lot of new vehicles in 1 year, so I'm just trying to understand why we need it. How many vehicles does the police have, and are we swapping them all to 8 new trucks?
We currently have a fleet of 32 vehicles, and so the logic is our rotation is a fourth of the fleet. So every 4 years we'll recycle through. So 1/4 of the fleet is the 8 vehicles, which we'll cycle through, and then every year we would buy 8.
Every year you buy 8.
Yes.
This is our third year.
This will be our 3rd year, correct? Yeah, and we actually fell short the first couple of years. So that's why we're buying 8. Typically, we would buy, 7, but because it's a number of 32, years before, the first year we bought 6. Last year we bought 7. This year we'll buy 8. So there could be 1 or 2 off in either direction, but the goal is to rotate the fleet every 4 years, which is a pretty conservative rotation as well when you consider that our vehicles are running 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, typically. And if the mayor wants me to, I can kind of get into the theory behind the F-150, if you want me to get into that. So,
I got that.
Okay, you're fine.
you got
Unless
that.
you want to, I understand the difference. I get it.
Okay.
Being in a rural community, I could see that's more beneficial than a car.
Well, there's
That's not so much that, really.
Yeah, there's also the residual, so the resale value, and I know Tom talked about that in one of the previous budget meetings, but the concept, and it's been successful for other communities, is that if we buy Crown Vic is what we used to have, you know, when I was a brand new officer, and now it's a Ford Interceptor, which is basically a bare bones Ford Explorer with some police upgrades. But we purchased a Ford Explorer or a police Interceptor for $40,000 to $45,000. We run that vehicle for 4 to 6 years, put 100,000 miles on it, and it's completely bare bones with vinyl floors, vinyl seats, you know, a AM, FM radio with no Bluetooth and things like that. At the end of the year, we've literally expended that vehicle's life, and so we sell it and we get $1,000 to $5,000 for it. The theory behind the 4-year rotation in the F-150 is we purchase vehicles on a state contract price, which is heavily discounted from a retail price. It's been getting less and less every year. In fact, Dodge just did away with their state contract pricing, but currently Ford and GM still offer state contract pricing. We purchase it for already discounted rate. We purchase a more desirable model, so a trim level. So instead of the XL with vinyl floors and whatnot, we get an XLT that has a little bit of an upgraded package that would, you know, be desirable for someone to purchase after we were done with it. We use that vehicle for 4 years, put approximately 40 to 60,000 miles on it, and we sell it with already the revenue of the state contract discount, and we sell it before its life is over, get that residual or the resale value, and then that revenue goes back into the fleet fund and helps offset the cost of the next year's vehicle. So,
And the value between what you described before is from $1,000 to $5,000. The F-150 is
right.
closer to.
Right. So we use all of, you know, $40,000 is just the cost of the Ford Interceptor, and then we put another. I think we're at around $17,000 to $25,000 in upfit, right, Tyler?
Yeah.
So we put another, you know, $25,000 into upfit, and then we've got a $65,000 vehicle that's worth $5,000 at the end of 4 years. Versus we purchase an F-150 for $52,000, I think is what they're going for now. We put that same amount of upfit into it. We recycle that upfit, so we only have to do that once every third cycle. We sell the F-150. We paid, you know, $50,000 for it. We sell it for $30,000. So it costs us $20,000 to run an F-150 versus $65,000 to run a Ford Interceptor. Any other questions for me, Council?
We're just in the initial purchasing phase is why that hasn't been going long enough.
Correct. We haven't realized any of the resale value of any of it because we're only in our 3rd year. So, well, just at the beginning of our 3rd year. So we've purchased 2 cycles, and we'll be purchasing our 3rd if the council approves this budget in July.
And then next year we'll be doing another 8.
Another 8, possibly 9, or possibly 7. Just kind of see where we're at with the vehicles that we need to rotate out. The other thing, so we have 32 vehicles that are on the road, but we do need to maintain what's called a line unit or a backup vehicle in case we have one go down for repairs or we get in a crash, which happens quite often. So we maintain 3 line units. 2 of those line units are older marked vehicles, so you're, you know, with the light bar and the police markings on the side. And we maintain 1 unmarked line unit for our detectives and our administration to use in case one of their vehicles go down. So in reality, we have 35 passenger vehicles in the police fleet.
Thank you.
So if somebody proposed to cut that down to 4, we would have to extend the lease on what we already leases, and the cost. How would the cost keeping the leases on the ones that we currently have?
We would extend out the life cycle of the vehicle. So we just lower the lease, the annual lease, but it's going to be captured, the same amount's going to be captured over the life of it. I'm still going to get $88,000 or $80,000. It's going to take me now 8 years instead of 5 years.
And then we lose the revenue portion on that as well. So every year longer we keep that, we reduces our revenue.
And since we haven't replaced the whole fleet, what would that do to the 4 that we would have to keep at the Tahoes or whatever?
F-150s? So are you talking?
Like
the Durangos that we're currently running.
Yeah.
So
we're going to replace 8 Durangos.
Correct.
And the Durangos were leasing?
Those have been purchased. They were purchased
Those are
last
purchased.
year's budget. We initially were leasing them. Yeah.
We purchased them.
This is where it gets a little, the
Okay.
Durangos had been leased to an external company,
Okay.
computers, but we had made the final payment on them and we made the option to purchase them from the lease store. We own the Durangos, they're ours completely.
And the initial line units that we'll be keeping will be the Durangos. I mean, obviously, you know, we're going to take the best of the vehicles that we would normally surplus, and we'll keep those as line units because they're the most serviceable. And then when the next batch comes in, then it basically just moves down the line. And currently, the way that we review those vehicles that we purchase is kind of on a point system, at least with the police department, and fleet helps with this quite a bit. We look at age of the vehicle. The three metrics that we use are age of the vehicle, mileage of the vehicle, and then repair history. And so we try to cycle out our worst vehicles first, if that makes sense, and then you know, the best of the 8 that we have that we would resell, we'll keep 3 of those and keep those as line units, and then sell them the next year and do the same thing with line units for next year. Any other questions for me? We're not asking for new police radios.
Asking for upgrade of LTD from a CD plate. 8-track.
That's so, and we talked about this at the last work session as well, is the number that goes into this cutoff number is, so every department has a vehicle, they have a lease payment back to the fleet fund. Whatever the total is for the entire city, that number gets used by the fleet committee to determine where does this cutoff go. So we're getting $2.3 million this year through lease payments. So that is what the cutoff was for the fleet committee to go and say, all right, I have $2.3 million, go buy new equipment for the fleet fund. New equipment means replacing equipment. The list down here below is new equipment to the fleet fund. So in this world, how it works is, so fire department, general fund, will transfer $30,000 to the fleet department so the fleet can make the purchase of the extraction. And then next year, we then go and add $30,000 of extraction equipment to the lease program. The fire will start paying that back to the fleet fund. So when the extraction equipment is retired, now with the 2% kicker on there, we'll just say it's going to last 10 years. It'll be a 20% increase. There'll be that new revenue available to the fleet fund, and that stuff is retired to go buy new extraction. That was I think I talked about this last. The green line you see here, the dump truck plow salter line. When we first did it, the number was, the cutoff would have been on the ambulance. Everything below number 4 would not have been able to be purchased this year. We were looking at 1.7 cutoff. You could reshuffle some of that stuff around, obviously, to get you more. That's where we were landing, and that was the decision that was made to do the inflation increase. And then also, I think it's important for the council to understand, as far as property taxes go, what does that mean as far as the general fund? Inside the general fund, property taxes make up about 12% of our revenue stream for the general fund. When we talk that 3.374 million, 3.4 million, 3.7 million, it is around that 12% number in the general fund.
If you had, just thinking and looking at numbers, did you have that spreadsheet?
I do.
Change that
If I can get
5%,
if I can get it out.
8%.
One I built will show you kind of the impact it's going to have on
Marble character.
Yeah.
Will it give us a total amount? I won't get.
That would have been a better spreadsheet to build. You figure, let's see, let's do that really quick. Figure each percent gives you about 30 grand.
In the total.
If you were just to do a 1% in property tax increase, it'd get you 30 grand.
From 5 to 6%, 95 and so.
Yeah. Yep. Okay.
Tell me if I'm looking at this wrong. Almost feels like we've gone from a proposed increase of 15 to saying we're very, very comfortable at the 10. Ready? That whole thing.
No, that's correct.
Really be very handy to have the numbers. We won't have those. So growth numbers that come.
Yeah.
Is it, I mean, 75,000, is that a,
It's a historical average over the last couple of years. That's just a
probably not.
very estimated.
It's not going to be.
Yeah, it all depends. I mean, I didn't take into account last year's number. Last year's new growth number was like $230,000. And the reason it was so high is because of an RDA project area that ended. So all that rolled into the new growth. So I know that's not happening. I just didn't look at years of normal behavior.
We look at new, with the projects that like Brigham Lofts, the apartments. How does that? How do they figure that in? Figure that what's completed?
Yeah, so it's the assessor goes in and he is required to say at January 1st, what is the value of the property? As far as what they actually go and, if it's a percentage of completion, that thing, I don't know all of the ins and outs of how that works. So, I mean, this is the numbers that are right now on state tax rate system. So it is showing a new growth number of $372,000. And why that is so high is how the tax rate is calculated is they go and look at real property Okay, so right now, these numbers aren't finalized either. Council's aware. So there's $1.9 billion in real property value inside of Brigham City's tax area. Last year it was 1.8 billion. And the important number that's missing is that incremental value. That is stuff that's in the RDA project area. Brigham City does not receive property tax for those RDA. Well, we receive the property tax, but then we give it to the RDA to do what they do. That number has not been subtracted out. So that's why it's showing such a huge new growth revenue, because what's currently in there, it's showing all RDA projects are over. Not true. That makes sense. So you can come over and look at here. So this year right now we have real property at the 1.9 billion. Last year it was the 1.7 billion. The number's coming from right here. So it's saying, hey, you have $258 million in value change. When the assessor and the county auditor go and look at this, they have to tell the tax commission, okay, of that 258, how much is value change? How much is Thor's house now being valued higher? How much of it is Ant-Man's value and everyone's, all the commercial and industry, an existing building, and it's just a value change? That goes into the certified tax rate process. But then, if someone just builds a new building, there's truly new growth that wasn't there the year before, now online. That is what creates, for lack of a better term, one-year windfall. It's outside of the certified tax rate process, but once it's in there, so this year we get it, and then that establishes the new base number rolling forward. So that was a very long explanation. I wanted you to kind of see where the numbers are headed. Yeah, the 372,000, that is not, because they're, right now as it's shown in there, everything is done. So like if we were to go back to 2023, since there wasn't a project area that ended that year, 55,000 was the total new growth at Brigham City. So again, if as the council gets ready to adopt the tentative budget next week, we will have more information available. Really pin this down tighter. Keep in mind is if we go through that truth and taxation process, that's what the council chooses to do. You can always reduce it. You just can't go above. So if you were to come in and say, hey, well, I feel comfortable with 2%, and that's what we went out and advertised to the public, had the public hearing about, and then during the public hearing process, you guys felt like you wanted to do 5%, we couldn't. But if flip it, if you advertise 5 and you wanted to do 2, we just can't go above what we had noticed for all of them.
As we shared so we look at that clearly the demand. So 15% here with it. Dropped it down. I guess what I'm saying is after next week, whatever we decide for a tentative budget, that is the number out and put out there notice. That's what will show up on their tax.
That's what will be in the newspaper. That's when they get their valuation notices in July from the county auditor. That will be in there. It's parcel specific, so in there, as you remember, it will show, hey, this is what Brigham City's proposed tax increase means.
If you don't propose one, then what happens?
If you don't propose one,
What happens?
$330.
You just cancel the project.
330,000 in revenue or 330 in expense.
So do you want us to be comfortable with at least the 10 going into the, I mean, is that what,
I'm just saying,
yeah,
I'm just saying if that's what we're going to do and that's what we
Yeah.
end up staying there. And then we can always, and again, so that, so as I'm thinking through this process, do that. Have 2 more months sales tax. Have our new growth number from the at that point. Don't need or
mhm.
because so we'll have a clearer vision in August than we will on by May, my opinion.
Very good chance they will. But again, I don't know the full where they are, but based on what they have inputted into the system, it appears they're pretty darn close.
Yeah, I'll be honest, you throw a number out there, we say 10%, knowing August we can take it down. Take it down quite a bit. It's not coming with protection. So I look at it, if we're gonna throw a number out here, real. But if you wanna sit here and say, yeah, let's go 10, August comes around, unless you can convince me otherwise, I just can't
Swallow the
feel
10.
conscious. Based on people I've talked to in this committee, it's a hard one.
And I understand that. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
I'm in a situation than you are.
Yeah, but I guess that's what I'm saying is if you and or not, I'm probably more inclined to
My world that I live in,
whatnot.
if
Yeah.
I throw a number out, most times than none, at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, the dust settles, the change is very small, not drastic. So that's what I look at. If I say, Tom, yeah, let's do 4. He'll probably come back next week and figure out how to make 4 work. Okay, let's sit at 9. I come back with 9. I'm saying this is hypothetical.
Yeah.
But I don't see numbers changing that dramatic, so, but you're all comfortable with saying, I'm working at 10 and knowing in August will go down, where I'm coming from.
I'm really comfortable with the 5, with these changes.
Okay. I really like the fact that Tom feels comfortable with the sales tax. I don't, I don't, but he has considerably more information.
More information. That was to me, that's a little scary for me.
The sales tax changes. You don't know what it is.
Exactly. I don't know what it is.
And that's the part of it. For me,
Sales tax actually hits the lower income people harder than it does the tax that hits harder home.
we have no control.
But we don't know what that. But if you raise it, it's an impact. So
Yeah, and so that's the part I want to be clear on the sales tax increase. It is not an tax like we're not going to change the sales tax rate. I'm just going to go in and change my revenue forecast in the budget.
you're not going to raise sales tax.
No, I'm going to
Expecting people to spend more.
I'm going to expect
Putting
people.
more in.
But you understand, if something like this gets in the paper, people see sales tax 1.5% increase. I look at it and go, oh, my sales tax if I go to Smith's is gonna go up 1.5%. That's how I read that.
I don't even know that we can, it'd be a heck of a process for us to be able, we would not be able to do that in one of these meetings, like just.
We may know that,
So-
most people don't.
Right, yeah. So that would mean, we would just have to clarify, the sales tax increase means that we would expect the 82.
But in the truth and taxation, if we give you the 5.
Yeah.
Then this chart, I mean, then we'll only be speaking about the 5.
Yep.
We won't be
Or
talking,
less.
yeah,
Yeah, and the other stuff on there just goes away. This
Yeah.
is just,
that's just internal, us knowing where that is.
yeah, the other $165,000 would be a revenue forecasted increase sales tax. But now would take the number to $5,482,500. Right now inside the mayor's budget is 5.4 million. As I explained, that was just based off of, hey, we're gonna hold it where we are right now. Most municipalities that I've talked to, they are budgeting a small increase in sales tax, anywhere between 2 and 5%.
Okay.
We just held the number out of an abundance of caution.
We're planning that.
Yeah, that would.
Which fits right in.
Yeah.
Hey, Ryan, I have people online saying you guys are kind of quiet. If we can talk closer
Sorry.
to the mic. Thank you.
And again, that's make it a one number that is always pretty certain inside a budget is property tax. That's why, as a accountant, I like it, because it's a known. Like, that is the amount we are going to get. Pretty darn close. I mean, there are some collection rates and Board of Equalization adjustments and things like that, but it's going to happen. Some of it may take 5 years to collect, or delinquent and things like that, but we will get that number pretty darn close to it. Sales tax, over the last few years, we have blown the doors off of sales tax. We have exceeded the forecast by hundreds of thousands. That was what has funded our capital project fund. The money, that surplus grew, we move it from the general fund over to capital projects. That's what has allowed us to go and buy fire truck we just bought. That is where that money goes. And also in recent years, interest has just gone very positive for the city in the last couple of years. And that is double-sided. Yeah, we get interest, but that also means we pay it on the backside.
And if we go to 5%, I mean, it just means I know which one of those I am, looking at that.
Your Spider-Man, is that you? Is that your house?
No. There's not on there.
So, and I was just thinking, if the sales tax number, I mean, if we're talking 150,000, that's like 2% of the sales tax. I mean, it's if we're off, it's not going to be. You know what I mean? I don't know if we understand or talked about how big a deal 150,000 is out of our sales tax revenue. It's a small number. It's only 2%. So there's some wiggle room there, and I think you'd be definitely within it. We thought our sales tax was going to come in at 2% more than last year. That sounds like that's pretty easy to get, because last year was 5.4. This year you've got 5.4 million, right?
Mm-hmm.
So to come in at 5.55, but I don't think is a huge ask or
Not
like,
crazy.
yeah, it's not a crazy increase to expect 2% higher in sales.
that we're gonna
tax.
collect.
That's not even the inflation rate.
That is a very good point that Councilmember Benson makes. And it's important that as we discuss this, Councilmember Jeffrey's point is, it is not a sales tax increase in the percentage that people pay. What we're talking about is what increase in what we're collecting in our forecast.
Well, to be clear, as this gets into the paper, I would change the wording on that. Sales tax revenue increase or something. But I think the average person in the community just thinks that the sales tax got increased. I mean, we all understand it here, but I don't think the average person would.
Yeah.
We just expect people to spend more or the
Yeah.
costs to go up because of inflation. We're not actually changing the sales tax rate at all.
Yeah, that's. But Tom, I really appreciate the work you've done into this. That makes this side of the table a little easier to understand. So thank you.
You bet. And again, like, it's one of those things, so if I were, my recommendation to council would be this model that you have going up on the screen right now. I would be comfortable proposing a 5.15%. If you just want to take it to 5%, I don't care if I do. Like, and then splitting the difference between sales tax and ambulance revenue for those forecasted revenues. And I'm, again, not to beat the dead horse, but I'm going to say it again. In the mayor's budget, those revenues have been held back conservatively. Sales tax is more of the economy and what we are experiencing with tariffs and inflation. And I mean, things are still bouncing a little bit, as you're all very aware. So to Councilmember Jensen's point, that number is more than fine. It's justifiable. It's not, I don't think we're endangering, not irresponsible. Fine. The ambulance revenue increase, that one is a change in state law. We haven't experienced exactly what that means. But we anticipate it being a positive thing.
Again, that's something that you guys understand considerably more than we do. Is I have zero idea how that ambulance works, the fees for that. So, as the staff to understand that, because I don't.
This is the best part about who we have on our team is the Chief Thueson and his team. They track that legislation. Cole becomes involved. Barry becomes involved. DJ, the mayor, becomes involved. And as we look at it, what it boils down to now is that transport at a paramedic level of care or an advanced EMT level of care, there are different rates that the state will allow you. Chief Thueson, on top of it, he's actually created, like a better term, policies and procedures. Hey, this is what, if we do this, build this. So, Brigham City, yeah, go on top of it. Especially those guys at the fire station. The police. Now we're talking fire, but that's behind me.
So if we take the, just to simplify numbers, we are increasing the lease 4%, right? 2%? Okay.
Well, 2% per year of the life of the
Yeah,
vehicle.
but
Okay,
I'm
yeah,
just trying to, so that we have a number that we can give. I'm trying to, like you said, take it down to 5.
Yeah, so, yeah,
And so we increase the sales tax too.
it wouldn't even be that much.
Yeah. Or the ambulance down to 4. And sales tax. Anyway, I'd like to go into the tentative budget. It's a 5%.
I'm kind of leaning the same way, and to me, my thinking is whether the offset side comes from sales tax or ambulance revenue, it's one pocket or the other. They're all going into the same bucket in the general fund. So whether we get it from sales tax or ambulance, that's kind of our cushion side. Property tax, like Tom said, is a known that we're going to put on the citizens. I'm not comfortable with the 15 where we started for sure, but also last year where we didn't have any increase. And I remember when the citizens did not like going years without increases just to keep up the cost and then get the huge one like we've talked about. People did not like that. And so I'm fine with this 5.15 increase on property taxes. And to me, it doesn't matter if we get it from the sales or the ambulance or all sales.
I agree with Matt 100% because at the end of the day, Tom, you guys know the inside of the budget and how to move money around to make it work because it does come, like Matt said, out of the same bucket. How you move it to make numbers work great, but I'm comfortable with the start at the 5.15 as well. You come in the middle with the other stuff that's.
And yeah, that's now because of Councilmember Jeffrey's comments, which are very applicable. I just want to make sure that people listening that go and listen to this recording or watch this, because keep in mind that when it up there where it says, I know they can't see me pointing at it, sales tax increase or ambulance revenue increase, those are forecasted in the budget increase. They are not, the council is not taking any action to actually increase any rate increase, right? A sales tax increase rate or even an increase regarding ambulance transportation. That is not what is being proposed. It is just, I'm going to go in and increase those revenue numbers inside the mayor's budget as a forecast.
Projected forecast revenue.
Yeah.
Thanks for clarifying that, Tom.
Just a point, Mayor Pro Tem. When would we have our truth and taxation scheduled for this, or Tom? Yes.
It is our first meeting in August.
Is it in lieu of the council meeting, or is it in conjunction with it? Not part of it. Okay.
They've changed the rules.
We don't have to have it passed before the.
We have to have it. No, we have to have a separate meeting where the only item that can be discussed is the budget, the proposed. So you then you can do a different meeting. We'll make sure that's all done correctly.
We're looking at August 7th.
August 7th, I'm looking over at Christina. We've done this timeline 1,000 different times. But yeah, I believe it's August 7th.
Good, because that's a long way to come out of it.
I know. I just going back on what you said earlier. If we put down that we want this 5.15, and that's the highest it can go, that's what we advertise in the truth taxation meeting. So, given that it's 2 months away, do we say there's some wiggle room and say start at 7.5%? Just because we don't have all the information, or because otherwise we're locked in. It's like we're voting for the 5% as the max right now. That's what we say we want in the truth and taxation, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and earlier today, my thinking, the truth and taxation is a little bit higher than the 5 until we get all of the information and then at the meeting when we adopt the final budget, August.
That would be nice. I mean, looking at the property tax increase there, it'd be like $4 a house.
We have a week to think. We don't decide that tonight either.
Right.
I mean, we can come in next week and say, hey, let's yeah, let's do it this way. So,
It would just
I mean,
be helpful to me.
yeah, well, it would be helpful to me too. When you make those, when you make those decisions and you're like, oh, I don't have all of the solid numbers yet.
Right, we'd have
So
too much.
therefore blah, blah, blah. And if I don't have them by next Thursday, then do I say the same thing without having all
I mean,
all
really
of
the,
numbers?
yeah, you're good. Like, the number is, we know we're gonna get 3.3
Right.
million
I don't know what.
without a tax increase. That is the number, well, here's the phrase that. We know we're gonna get 3,241,827. Like, this number is, there will be a new growth component. I don't know what that number is going to be. Yeah. So, up to the council, whether you want to put in a 7% number and we go from there. I am comfortable with the 5%. If the council were to say, I'm
And again, we don't do this next week. We'll have to decide it next week.
yeah, there's nothing wrong with that.
With more than likely not. Right. 7% or 8 or whatever.
Do you guys want to think about it for a while? I have some other
Yeah.
questions. Do you have any other questions
I
about
think we
this stuff?
each have-
I'm sure we do. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sure we do. And we can, and
I
And we
agree
can-
with Rob, and that's what I'm afraid of.
we can have some discussion next week. And again, we have to all we have to do is decide tentative budget for next week.
Yeah, if you can,
So that-
I need a
So that,
number.
yeah, so that people know what
Right.
that is. So next Thursday, we don't have to have that tonight and have that next week. But with the realization that if we go to 5.15 next week, and that's what we decide, we can go down, we cannot up if numbers we don't have the new growth, and that changes a little bit. It's not gonna change a ton. If we didn't get any new growth, it'd be 2%.
Yeah, so that's not a big factor. I'm fine, I'm comfortable with the 5.15 as well. The screen we've got right there, I think I'm be okay with.
Food for thought for the next week.
So I will prepare the tentative budget. We'll use the screen that's up here
Or the other
look
one.
at through the budget. Okay.
Yeah.
So, is there any other items?
Is there anything else you?
If I have some
talked
just
about?
things I need to clarify with the council, just as I prepare the budget to make sure I'm on.
Okay.
As you guys. So, the first thing is, for the first work session we had, we talked about utility rates. EPAC is headed to 0. The agenda for next week, we're actually gonna move that up 1 month. We've hit, now we're at about $7 million in rate stabilization fund. Mayor Bott instructed me to get it onto the agenda for next week. The PPAC. That will be happening for the month of June.
Effective for June.
Effective for June. The customer charge going to $10, or we're talking resident. We're just gonna follow the Dave Berg rate schedule. There was, council had other thoughts, ideas, concerns. Blue Can going to $9.50 for recycling. And then I looked in the contract, so the 1-year requirement is in our contract. I don't believe it's something that we could actually modify. That would be a question I could, with legal.
For the blue can.
For the,
I mean, if you have a blue can, you have to have it for at least a year before you can get rid of it.
so that would mean that people that came in today to my office and got a blue can, they are right now paying $7.75, whatever it is. A month from now, it now goes to $9.50. They're locked in for.
Can we keep the people that are within the year?
Be a bit of a headache. We'd have to create a whole different rate schedule. I wouldn't recommend.
There's rules on that. There's actually law on that.
We would have to.
Everyone has to pay the same fee. Can't
Then
grandfather people in,
Yeah.
so.
then the other things I'm building in, so we're gonna keep the fleet as proposed, build in the building inspector.
I was okay.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
So the personnel changes I have in the budget is there's three new FTEs that are going.
The two that are in the budget,
That were proposed, yeah.
and then the one.
IT, fire marshal, and now the building. I think that's all I had. Is there anything the council has they want me to make sure I skipped or didn't think of, or?
Can you just quickly explain why the library fund is
Yeah, you bet.
how it was done? Just
So in the past,
Dramatic pause.
sorry, I had to go. I was like, oh, I was like, I can show you, I have it. So let me pull up last year's tax rates. We'll just look over here. So last year, Brigham City had two different tax levies, rates, I don't know what you want to call them, inside the tax system. There's the general operation rate, and then there's also the library rate. That library rate was a dedicated revenue source for the library. So last year, we anticipated to collect $872,000 from that levy. And because that was identified in the tax rate system, it has to be spent at the library. So as we've met with staff and looked at other things, and the other issue is what we felt was the library, really, we didn't look at them as, we looked at capital projects. It was like, hey, you have your own money, don't come ask for other funding because you have your own. If you want something, save up, go get it when you want. We felt that probably wasn't fair on both sides. So we made the decision, we contacted the tax commission, looked at state code. So the plan is we're just gonna roll that rate into the general operating. And as soon as we do that, it's no longer a restricted revenue source. So there's no need to have a library fund. It just become part of the general fund. Now when they have projects, and if it's a large project, currently, let me back up and say that. So whatever is in the library fund right now, in their savings account, in their fund balance, it's going to come over to the general, but it's going to be restricted to library use only. So I'm not allowed to take their savings account and go spend it on streets or parks. That's not allowed because that money came through that dedicated funding that had existed. But what we're doing in the mayor's upcoming budget in fiscal year 26 is we're just going to eliminate that rate inside the state's tax. We're just going to put everything in the general operation. The library fund will still continue to be funded at these levels. It's just now as they propose projects that they're treated like any other department. If they have a big project that raises to the top, we now can send city's full resources at it. As they request different projects or in staffing. In all honesty, it had been treated like you have your money, you can go do that, it's fine. Yeah. There's really no, I mean, we did make sure things were, I don't want to give the impression we weren't looking at it or not doing it, but like, well, you got enough money, go do it. Yeah, that's fine. That seems appropriate. That's not ridiculous what you're asking for. But we saw a time coming where they were going to be larger and larger projects. We wanted to have the ability to fund them also to compare them, bring them on an equal playing field with other departments in the city. So really that was the main driver. It's probably a way longer answer than you wanted or needed, but
So that tax rate for the library was already in our tax rate?
yeah, so
Okay.
Yep.
So it's not a separate tax.
no, that was the crazy part. So when you receive your tax notice, you'll just see the .001706. But on my end, when I get that money from the county treasurer sends it over to us, I have to go and allocate it out based on those percentages. All right, library, you get this much. General operations, you get this much. End of the year, my auditors come in and they would look at that and say, hey, what are you doing? You didn't allocate it. They never said that. They said, hey, you did a great job. But they could say,
But the tax, county or the state tax
yeah, because that is a restricted.
are okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. They've said, yeah, we can roll that all into one rate. Away we go. The library board, I'm looking over at Councilmember Jeffries. He used to be on the board. He no longer is. Councilmember Hibbs, but the library board will continue to exist, function, so useful. I think there actually is probably an appointment coming to the council in the near future of new members. So the library is part of the city and is just putting them inside the general fund.
Thanks. Anything else? Anybody? Other questions? Clarifications? You spotted that you were like, what? Okay, so next week, that's what we're gonna do, is we're gonna, we talked, this is kind of where we're headed. So you have a week to go over that. If you're still okay with it in your head, and we'll adopt a tentative budget next week. That's because we won't meet June. We have one meeting. That's next week, June 5th.
Next week's, it's a fun meeting.
And then we'll have
Lots of public hearings. So you will, in the RDA and the MBA, you will actually adopt the final budgets for them. Because they're not impacted by the taxes. But you can go ahead and approve those final budgets and away we go. The city budget will be the tentative budget that Councilmember Smith is talking. And that is tentative until we hold the public hearings and then we make it a final budget and cover the truth.
Okay. If there's nothing else, then we need to have a motion to adjourn.
No, we don't, but are we doing a work session next week before the council?
Start at 5, right?
Are we? Do we want to?
We had talked about one.
Yeah. Do you guys have anything else you want to go over before that? I'm probably okay. I have to have one.
I don't think we need a work session. I think you're right, but
Okay,
so we
so
go back to 6.
we would just start at 6 then if we don't feel like we need a work session. You okay with that?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Okay, so we don't need a work session for next week.
If it
We'll
changes,
start at 6
then the tax
6
down.
p.m. Yeah.
My tax
Yeah.
factor.
It won't change because we have to notice it. So if we're not going to do it,
I have to notice it
yeah,
tomorrow.
So if we don't need it by tomorrow, and I think we're okay. You guys are good. I think we're good to not. Okay, and if we don't need a motion to end the work session, then any other questions, then we'll adjourn. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Tom.